Good morning and good evening, everybody. Welcome to the webinar E-Chinese Yuan, Pathways and Potential of China's Digital Currency. My name is Cláudia Trevisan, and I'm the Executive Director of the Brazil-China Business Council, CEBC. This event is organized in partnership between CEBC and Zhejiang University International Business School, better known as ZIBS. China is at the forefront of the adoption of a digital currency, with roughly 100 million Chinese already using an electronic version of their currency. This is a hot topic that gained even more prominence with the war in Ukraine and the sanctions imposed against Russia, which stimulated the debate about the use of alternative currencies to the dollar in the international financial system. To discuss this issue, we have with us today a stellar panel of specialists from China, the United States, and Brazil. All of them combine academic expertise with practical experience with the financial sector. Wen Wu, also known as David Wen, is a professor and the executive director of the International Research Center for FinTech Security at ZIBS. Professor Wen is the co-founder of the first Silicon Valley company to provide central bank digital currency solutions globally. Daniel Reis holds a master and a doctoral degree in economics and researches the issue of digital currency. He has held positions at Brazil's Central Bank and the Bank for International Settlements, and is currently Coordinator General for the Financial Sector at Brazil's Ministry of Economy. Jamie Al-Sheikh is a professor at ZIBS and at Columbia Business School, and founder of the think tank Central Bank Digital Currency. Sérgio Quadros is a visiting professor at Unicinos, and was responsible for the opening of the first branch of Banco do Brasil in Shanghai, where he worked as the bank's general manager from 2008 to 2016. We'll have presentations from David, Daniel, and Jamiel, and then brief comments from Sergio. After that, we will open for questions from the audience. If you have one, please use the Q&A tool to send it. David, thank you so much for being with us. The floor is yours.
David, I think you have to unmute.
I think you need to go.
Yeah, sorry. I made the fatal mistake, which you want me not to. I didn't unmute. So thank you very much for the generous introduction, and very good to see my old friends, Daniel and Jamil, all here. And we used to work in the ITU focus group and on different forums promoting CBDC, and it's very good that when China has done some of the testing work, we're still in the stage of testing, and we have old friends and coming together to have a hopefully lively discussion, because I remember we had a lot of back and forth debate as well, even back in 4 or 5 years ago. So hopefully this presentation is not only educational, but also good for all of us participants. And so today I will start with kind of quick introduction of e-CNY. And this is very timely because the city I'm right at, which is Hangzhou, China, where Zhejiang University is a beautiful city, by the way. It's in China ranked number 1, number 2, nice, livable and beautiful city in China. So we just had the opportunity to try out e-CNY as the third group. So the first group, of course, the capital city, and I think it's Suzhou and Shenzhen. But the second group, it gets a little bit bigger. This group have 9, I think, cities. So we are getting a lot of lessons learned. So hopefully today I will go into a little bit quick introduction on what it is. So here is a picture. Hold on, I think I need to shrink this panel. Yeah, and which we used to do the training session with all these banks. Obviously, you know, this is just image, and you will see this when you use the app. In fact, it's part of the design feature to make the phone app very similar to people who get used to you know, use the paper notes. But if you look at the QR code there, and if you scan it using our typical like you know, Alipay or something, anything WeChat Pay, you will be able to see the string which is in the bottom. Okay, so the one that below is the encoding of everything that you need about this particular unit of e-CNY in a digital form. And this is not a normal digital form like, you know, numbers and things. It has crypto in it. It can be used to represent a kind of value-based, you know, that's in CBDC circle called value-based. Okay, so this can be actually passed between hardware and just like a cash. So in China, the function of e-CNY specifically designed to allow a kind of offline use, which is double offline. Which means the payer and payee can both be offline. So the only way you can achieve that is to have some kind of value-based system. And that's what this is. Of course, you know, it's extensible, and it has some smart contract things, but it's not really like the smart contract where you have interest and things, but it's all about the kind of what do we call, you know, schedule the payment for today. But maybe later on, they can be used to have more complex, extensible features. But obviously, it cannot interfere with the basic concept of M0. That was, you know, the red line. So any kind of smart contract can use, but not to make interest, make transfer the ownership or whatever. That's not part of it. And this unit, I mean, this blob, this data value unit contains the issuer, obviously, and also unique serial number, time, stamping, and also who is the operator. All of those information are encoded in this blob, and only the secured elements, secured point of sale devices or other official readers can interpret that and authenticate it. And this is the architecture, and I think most people have read about the 2-layer, but this diagram shows a layer called 2.5. This is a kind of later addition in order to explain why do you need all of this, you know, third party and so on between me and the actual 9 operators, 9 main operators. So the whole idea is that obviously you have the layer 1, which is the central bank, in this case, PBOC, People's Bank of China. So the design is a PBOC and operate a 2-layer architecture, and the PBOC issues the e-CNY to the 9 operator means operating banks in this case. They're all really dominant banks that it's really involving a sector. Like the top four, 中农工建 means industry bank, agriculture bank, and Bank of China dealing with trade, industry obviously for industry, agriculture, and then construction bank. Then we have the post bank, and then we have private type of, not private per se, but it's more to do with private industry, which is the merchant bank. We have the bank that is behind WeChat. We have, it's called Weizhong. We have the bank behind, obviously, Alipay. So these are the ones that covers most of the economic sectors. Okay, so that's the purpose of the layer 2. So all the economic sector in China are covered. However, in order to reach the bloodstream, so to speak, we need the 2.5 layer. This layer obviously does a lot less than what the layer 2 does. Layer 2 have to be responsible for the reserve and all the M0 type of responsibility. But the 2.5 is really a network. And it can be a network of UnionPay, a network which gathers specific group of consumers. And this group of consumers actually changes depending on the age of the people, the economic change or the technology change. So it's deliberately designed as such that this 2.5 layer are responsible for really a payment kind of job. It's the wallet, okay? So typically our governor would always say, WeChat Pay, Alipay, or Lian Pay, all of these previous third-party payment companies are just wallet in a sense, but inside it flows the e-CNY. So now you can see the 2-point layer and the CBDC layer really separated in the different functions. Obviously, public, general public, including consumers as well as business, government, are all accessing this through this layer. This is some screen capture of the software wallet. This I think the 9, I actually had 4. So I personally installed one app, which is the one on the left side called e-CNY Wallet. And this is wallet developed by the Digital Currency Institute. And it's on all the platform, iPhone, Android, Huawei, all kinds of phones you can go and download. And then you can open wallet with 9 of the banks. That's not the same wallet as I just said earlier. This is the e-CNY wallet. Okay, you have to have that wallet. Then the other type of wallet are called the child wallet. I won't have time to go inside that details, but usually the consumer don't need to worry about those. We access this via a very easy interface, just like the WeChat, Alipay. You have, and all of those are built into the merchants. For example, if you are in a taxi or whatever you are, so you will be prompted to pay by e-CNY or Alipay or WeChat Pay bank cards. So e-CNY, just like cash, is a way for you to pay. So you get to choose whenever you are in the situation. So there are, that's why the Chinese one is called DCEP. I don't know if you have heard this, but it's called Digital Currency Electronic Payment. So it is a payment. It's a legal payment, okay? Same as cash, and the same as, have to say, the bank cards, the third party payment, licensed third party payment, they're all legal payment ways for Chinese consumers, so they have a lot to choose. The right side is a different one. So if you are really want to use a bank app, which I doubt, but then you can use the bank's what's called the small program, 小程序. That's all possible. But as I say, don't worry about all this wallet and things. It's only when you need to scan a barcode and buy something, the variety of payment solution pops up to you, you use it. So the consumers doesn't need to learn something new. Oh, this is CBDC, you have to whip it out from that and clean it up. No, it's just like what we used to do. Okay. So we also have a hardware wallet. Okay. And this, hold on. This is to make sure, for example, we have a complete solution. There are two cases where I think this can be useful. Obviously, as you can see, the one has a screen and keyboard. One looks like a normal card. The other one's in the phone, and there's wearable ones. I think there are two cases this may be useful. One is in emergency. Okay, I actually gave a talk at the Emergency Bureau. China has a separate, like a US FEMA. So we have talked about how this can be used issued, and making sure they can be used in disaster situation quicker maybe than the cash or something. And then the second use is the wearable, because as we know, we're going into the metaverse, the kind of digital world where people are having interface in the virtual and the real. And the young people are very much into that. I think for the bank, I gave them the recommendation that you need to watch what the young people use and then make sure they can access e-CNY in their kind of social network application, and so on and so forth. And I think it's most important part where China had this. Oh yeah, the third part is allow certain type of anonymity. So when you have complete offline kind of a payment situation, you can maintain anonymous. This is designed by PBOC, but you have a limit on how much the anonymous payment can be. I think it's reasonable, right? So most people don't want to track me to spend a little bit of money, but if you really want to move millions of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars, yeah, any country, you will need to be reporting to the regulators. Okay, here is some kind of case where it's been deployed. So, until end of last year, there are more than 8 million trial spots and 261 million wallets, total 87 billion. This is a small, I think, still. It will have a kind of exponential tick, but right now it's on the lower end of it. And I think with the third group, with Hangzhou and a lot of online use of it, because today most of the case was offline, so you need to have people doing the markets and so on. It's limited the volume, but in Zhejiang there are 6 cities participating in the Run 3. And there will be a lot of what we call the online kind of trial. Hangzhou is the birthplace of Alipay, right? And so a lot of online shopping and even cross-border shopping originate here. So we will see a lot of uptick in the volume soon. So here, I think just a few more slides. This, I like it. What is CBDC, right, in Chinese term? This is one slide from Yao Qian, Dr. Yao Qian. So it's electronic money. It's still a kind of electronic money plus the properties of physical cash. That's what it is. So it's a credit-based currency, meaning trust-based. It's a fiat and it's crypto. As I said, as you can see, it's the value-based. It has cryptographic elements in it. And it's algorithm-based and also smart currency, meaning You can have smart contract, stuff like that. And here is an overall design by China PBOC in early days. And in fact, it completely separate how CBDC will use different technology for wholesale and for retail. For the wholesale, they were using e-CNY. I mean, that's Bank of England's earlier trial. I don't know how much the current one is different from the e-CNY. I think it's very much different now. And the wholesale one is closer to the currency mint, which is a company I co-founded in 2011, meaning kind of connecting all the mobile wallets and the third-party payment. And I think that's just about the time I have to share with you. And it's a lot of contents, but very short time to present. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. Yes, it's super interesting and would need a lot of time to know all the details. I'd like to pass the floor now to Daniel. Daniel, welcome and thank you for being with us.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Claudia, once again. Thank you, the Brazil-China Business Council and ZIBS for inviting me today. Let me also greet the co-panelists, David, Jamil, and Sergio. To the audience, it's a pleasure to speak to all of you. My name is Daniel Reis. I'm a researcher in economics, and I'm currently working at the Ministry of Economy in Brazil. Previously, I worked at the Central Bank of Brazil and the Bank for International Settlements, usually known as the Bank of Central Banks, which is in Basel. The typical disclosure applies here. I'm only talking my personal capacity, and the views and opinions shared here are only mine. If you plan to quote me, it's fair to mention me at the moment as a researcher, please. My today's talk is twofold. First, I want to share some thoughts about digital money, the central bank's digital currencies, CBDCs, and some views on virtual currencies, assets, or whatever one decides to call them. Then I want to provide you with a sneak peek of what's currently going on in Brazil regarding legislation and regulation. This Brazilian outlook may provide you with an international comparison opportunity when considering the Chinese case. I'm not an Englishman, but I'll start our conversation today by talking about the weather. It's almost 9 a.m. in Brazil, and it's sunny outdoors. I'm in front of my desk, literally talking to the future. For those in China, you are 10 hours ahead of me, and probably starting a lovely evening there. If I need to transfer you some money, I hope I don't have to transfer money, but if I do have to, I can take some banknotes from my pocket and exchange them from maybe banknotes and take these notes and ship them to China. It would probably take far more than the 10 hours I mentioned before, right? Well, before you stop listening to me and start reading something much more interesting, as I'm not talking about digital here, I do agree there's much more a much more updated way of sending money. Now I can pick my phone, pick the phone from my pocket, open WeChat, the WeChat app, no marketing here, where I do have some balance, and I may transfer the money to you almost instantaneously. In fact, the money may arrive even earlier than my video arrives to you. We won't discuss time travel today, but having money in an online app and transferring it instantaneously is already available to anyone. It has been available for a while, and it's digital. So why are you talking here about digital money as an innovation if it's already available to us? This is the question. There must be something different from the old digital money that we are kind of talking to this this new digital money that we are starting to talk about, or is the core of our conversation today. Definitely, it's not the word digital. The difference lies on the state, on the sovereign issuance. It might surprise some of you if I say the money that you have on the app is a sort of stable coin, a usual term that we are listening today to. The app provider says, I have some amount of money denominated in a sovereign currency, and guarantees that the value of it will be, at least for some time indefinitely, taking at par. And we acknowledge it as money. If I dwell on discussing this point, it would take me a lot of time. But in sum, one money provider says I have a certain amount of denominated in a specific currency scale and guarantees the exchange rate to some exchange. If the money provider is some app owner, denomination is private money. If we take the exchange rate and denomination taken to itself, then it's a virtual currency. If denomination is to some foreign currency, I have a stable coin. If I change the denomination to a sovereign currency, I get the WeChat money we're talking about. If I change the money provider to the central bank, then I get the national banknote. I didn't talk about digital here, right? Well, wrong, I just finished talking about banknotes. So if we turn it to digital, I get professors when CBDC. But who uses banknotes nowadays, right? Just a tiny fraction of economies are still not digital. Sometimes this tiny share corresponds to a large amount of small retail payments, like it does in Brazil. So in this case, digitalization may have a large impact on a small number of use cases. Still, it impacts many people. There are some ways of addressing this issue. I'm not sure if digital currency is the most suitable one here, right? For us here, we are probably using the app money. So the issue here is not about getting digital, but who the money provider is and how the exchange rate to the sovereign denomination is enforced. So if the financial system relies mainly on private money issues with loose regulation, it might make some sense to talk about CBDCs. If private money is already sufficiently regulated, maybe updating the rule is all you have to do. And you want to call it CBDC, it's okay, right? Or perhaps you just want to make some public policy, usually focusing on financial inclusion, and you find CBDC a fashion term and you just use it too. It's also accepted, right? Whether in China, Brazil, or any economy, the core question is on the benefits of the designed CBDC. Who is benefiting from the CBDC introduction? Who pays the bill? Whether it's an introduction of regulation or whether it's a super tax system, the question is who is paying for this regulation or for the system, and what benefits are brought to society. Let me leave the topic here, right? I hope at this point you may have many questions teasing your mind. I will be happy to go further in the Q&A sessions, or just drop me a line later. I'll be more than happy to go deeper into the discussion. Let me just to jump to the next topic. Sorry, Claudia,
okay.
Did I
Go ahead.
exceeded my, okay. So let me jump to my next charting. So what's going on in Brazil? I will again split here the conversation, starting from the developments in virtual currencies and then moving to the sovereign denominated money. Looking to virtual assets, there is currently in Brazil a law proposal in progress that's a relatively advanced legislative stage. In fact, it has been approved in both legislative chambers, and as the project was amended in Senate, it's in the House of Representatives for a decisive vote round.
If approved, it will be turned into regulation, and it will regulate virtual asset providers and subject them to regulation and supervision. The law proposal mimics the same regulatory framework of our regular financial system. On CBDCs, the Central Bank of Brazil is running some experiments with market participants. 9 projects are being tested with partners, including Santander Bank, the Brazilian Banks Association, FEBRABAN. There's a Visa Microsoft partnership, among other partnerships. The central bank governor has suggested that some prototype will be available later this year. In some, these are all the initiatives that are underway here in Brazil, in both the private digital currency and the public bank issued digital currency topics. Let me stop here. Well, that now it's true. Thank you very much for your attention, and let me turn the floor back to Claudia. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. Yeah, you raised a lot of interesting questions, and I hope you have some time to discuss at least some of them. Jamil, welcome, and please, for your remarks.
Sure. I'm going to share my screen. Just going to confirm that you can see it now. Are you able to see it? Yes? Yes. Okay, great. Yep, great. Thank you, everyone, for coming today to attend. Thank you, Claudia and Professor David, for inviting me into this event. I'm going to be talking about 2 different things. One is I run a CBDC think tank, cbdctt.com, and we basically work with different central banks and getting them in front of the public, and then also working on education and advisory work, which is an area that is growing. And I also run another company called Instimate, which is a whole other world related to NFT, enterprise NFTs. So I'm going to cover the think tank, what we do, just for a few minutes, and then I'm going to, as per Professor David's request, talk about the e-CNY and how it compares with, at least at the macro level, with other projects globally, especially the ones that we've been exposed to through the think tank, and just going to do a quick comparison and see what the high-level differences are. But very quickly, the CBDC think tank is just a group of mostly academics, researchers, and central bankers have come together. And the membership is open to different tiers. If you're interested in joining, just go to the website. And it's really about people that are passionate about this space and the future of human civilization as it relates to digital currency. So our goal is really to disseminate information and then potentially get involved in advisory work. And we've won awards for the kind of education that we do. For example, the Currency Research Award we won in February for the education services we do. And then we bring in a lot of different banks. These are the banks that have come in and discuss their work, and we usually have one bank a month come in and do kind of a deep dive around what they're working on. And we did have Professor David Wen come in and talk about the e-CNY, and hopefully we'll get the PBOC to come in at some future point in time. And then we do engage with some central banks. This is, for example, the Bank of Kazakhstan's white paper, which was released a few months ago. We were involved in reviewing the paper and reviewing some of the architecture. And we do work with some central banks at this stage in advisory work, and we see that growing fairly rapidly. We also run a really popular portal called CBDC Insider, where the number of hits is just increasing every month. And it's a place to get news, and there's actually something called a reading library. If you log in, and it's all free, there is this massive trove of digital currency PDFs. If you want to really understand and educate yourself, it's a great place to go and get that kind of content. And we also engage with the MIT and Boston Fed Project Hamilton. Currently, we're building a sandbox. This is kind of an educational tool. The sandbox provides a user interface to the Project Hamilton code base. If you look at the code base and you run it, really pretty raw and very technical. not something the casual central banker could use or to understand. And so we're building a sandbox that will allow central bankers to come in and have a very friendly interface to play with the Project Hamilton, to run accounts, run transactions, run simulations, do reporting, all that kind of stuff. And we expect an early release in a few months for the sandbox. And we're using it as a tool to understand both the details and the core engine of how OpenCBDC works, and then also seeing and drawing parallels with that and what's happening with e-CNY as much as we're able to infer. Also, we do lots of events, and we announced actually the first CBDC conference in January 2020. Obviously, that didn't happen. We have announced it again for this year. We do it during the week of the IMF annual meeting in DC. That will be October 12th and 13th. Just go to cbdctt.com for more information, and look forward for having ZIBS involved in the conference as well. So quickly, I want to cover some major themes in terms of how e-CNY compares to other projects, especially the ones that are, that have more visibility. And I think the first thing that is abundantly clear is that the scale and the size of the e-CNY project is massively different than any other project that exists on the planet right now. Right, just the immensity of how many users and how much technical know-how is going into that project is not comparable to any other project at this time. So easily, still with over 200 million users, the e-CNY is regarded as still kind of in a test phase, and is not regarded as something that's out in production use. And there is no other country that is doing anything similar at that scale. So e-CNY in many ways is head and shoulders above in terms of the size and scale of the work that it's doing. In addition, e-CNY is positioned really, really well for mass adoption. So 200 million can be considered some type of adoption, some degree of adoption, but via its integration with the super apps like WeChat and Alipay, there can be nearly immediate mass adoption across the country if the PBOC wanted to do that. And we don't see that type of parallel type of integration possible anywhere else. And that may change. Let's say, for example, the US Federal Reserve may roll out something and then integrate with PayPal, things like that. But we don't see that happening anytime soon, right? It's at least a few years out, if not more. But we do see that integration occurring in the e-CNY. And the propensity and the impact of that type of integration, again, also is not paralleled anywhere else in any other CBDC project. And then we see that the e-CNY apply a specific type of methodology. That methodology is very iterative. Obviously, a lot of it is not open to the public to see, but you can see that there is approach of deploying and then testing and improving, and then continue to deploy this kind of iterative process. Whereas other banks are doing a proof of concept and maybe internal, and then maybe releasing only after they hit a certain target into production. And then there's very few retail CBDCs that are in production, and those that are not really getting the type of adoptions that you might think they plan to have. Right. So this kind of learn early, test, push out, deploy, evaluate, learn, and make adapt and adjust. Is indicative of a culture that is intentional and is a way for the e-CNY to continue to improve over the coming years. And I think we'll continue to see more and more features get added in and more sophistication be included in that. And if you look at some of the documentation, like the white paper, typically when you roll out a large system, let's say in banking, I have a background in banking, you do things like Monte Carlo simulations, things like that. This is something that the PBOC has planned for. So they've done several million scenarios of the use of the e-CNY beyond just the ones that are actually used, but these test uses. So there's significant planning and trying to scope out the edge cases and trying to understand how the e-CNY can potentially get into a bad situation. And so this is work that's being done up front, and we don't see that anywhere else. A lot of the work right now is related to how it should be designed in other countries and potentially maybe how a wallet might look like, and that seems to be the scope. The architecture, and we don't have full details. Obviously, we don't have access to the source code, so we can't really tell what the architecture is, but we can infer that it is hybrid, multi-tiered architecture, and it borrows from multiple domains, right? So it borrows from the blockchain domain and discards what may not be suitable from the blockchain world, and then borrows from the centralized distributed computing systems world what really is useful, and brings the both together, which is unique. Well, actually almost unique. Project Hamilton does something similar, but the e-CNY seems to be more robust in its flexibility. And as we saw Professor David Wen mention, this layer 2.5 is an interesting aspect that shows that the e-CNY can have, from an architecture point of view, the ability to become more and more sophisticated. And I think this is also very, very important, is the e-CNY is not a single project. Most CBDC projects right now are just single projects. They may have one or two legs, but the e-CNY is probably at least 20 to 30, if not more, projects. So if, there are probably hundreds of people working on this, multiple teams. And so they all have parallel, independent work streams, independent deadlines, independent deliverables, and they're working together. So it's not one project where there's a specific single deadline and the project ends there, phase one ends there. This is something, you have complete machinery operating with multiple teams and multiple projects, even within a single team that are delivering. And so the complexity of the organization behind the e-CNY is fairly advanced compared to any other CBDC project that's occurring right now. On the basis of the information that we have in our discussions with many other organizations, the Bank of China has been talking to many other technology vendors, buying their technology and then integrating that technology, or potentially integrating and then discarding that technology if they see that it's no longer a fit. And so the bank is being fairly nimble and fairly open in acquiring technology. For example, we talked to an Israeli company that sold the PBOC technology for quantum resistance related to CBDC work. They don't know how it's being used. All they were told is that there was an arrangement to purchase it. They agreed to that arrangement, and a sale was made. Whether that technology is being used or how it's being used is not known, even to the seller of that technology. But it indicates a culture in the PBOC of the willingness to acquire technology to build a more robust platform. And I think that this, goes as an important point to make, is that relatively speaking, China started very, very early in its research. We have banks that are just starting now, maybe a year ago, 2 years ago, at least from what we know publicly. The PBOC has been working on and researching this work since 2014, and that's fairly new compared to other banks. Sorry, compared to other banks that are working on this, have very new projects. The PBOC has had the opportunity to become very seasoned in their understanding of the nuances of building a digital currency in a very complex economy with multiple complex requirements, right? So that kind of head start has given the PBOC some very, very significant advantages, and for other banks to catch up will require a significant amount of time. And we also see the PBOC, and Professor David Wen, the fact that he's engaged with the PBOC is a testament to the fact that the bank is embedded with the private sector, as we saw in the layer 2 operators and layer 2.5, but also embedded with other organizations and including academia, right? And so we don't see that in some of the banks. They're kind of working with vendors only in some cases, and maybe that may be potentially detrimental. But the fact that the PBOC is pulling multiple disciplines together to try to produce a more resilient product, a more thoughtful and more sophisticated product is something that we don't see anywhere else, generally anywhere else in the depth and the level and the intensity that the PBOC is engaged, right? And then just finally, a lot of CBDC projects are thinking about just how to issue the CBDC. Maybe they will include a wallet, but also we see that the PBOC has full infrastructure. They have call centers, help centers. So there is a full organizational support structure behind the e-CNY that typically most CBDC projects do not even, if you look at the RFP work and things like that, that come out from some of these banks, they're not even considering that, right? They're just figuring out, how do we get a digital currency out, and maybe how do we get a wallet, and how does that look like? And so I think those are examples of how the e-CNY compares to what's happening globally. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel.
Yep.
Very good presentation. And I understand, Professor Wen, do you want to say something before I pass the floor to Sergio?
No. I was just trying to tell him he finished.
Okay.
He didn't say it.
Thank you. Sergio, welcome. A pleasure to have you with us.
Okay, thank you very much, Claudia, and all the speakers for the excellent, insightful presentations. I was delighted when CEBC invited me to participate in this webinar on a topic that will certainly affect the way payments are made in cross-border transactions around the world. It's an honor and a pleasure to me. I will be brief in my comments, and I think there will be many questions in the QA session because this topic is being explored right now by over 8 central banks around the world, and more than a quarter of them are developing or running concrete pilots, according to the latest survey from the Bank for International Settlements. The survey also shows that at least 40 to 50 central banks are likely or might possible to launch a CBDC within 5 to 6 years. China is the most advanced country in CBDC development among the largest economies in the world, maybe 5 years ahead of other countries. In my opinion, CBDC and cash will be used together in the next years because, for example, a risk of cyber attack and other risks and the dependence on digital payments is a real concern. Cashless means less cash, not no cash. CBDC will bring free and immediate domestic payments that will spur one incredible amount of innovation as it is doing in China right now. In my opinion, although e-CNY is still designed mainly for domestic retail payments and a few trials in wholesale payments at present, it has already been used as a pilot in cross-border payment programs, such as the multiple CBDC bridge project that involves central banks from China, Hong Kong, Thailand, and United Arab Emirates. There is also another program called Project Dunbar, both managed by Bank of International Settlements, Hub Innovation. They are exploring the applicability of CBDC in cross-border scenarios. Of course, cross-borders involves monetary sovereignty, foreign exchange policies, and compliance requirements, but work with relevant central banks and monetary authorities, People's Bank of China will set up exchange arrangements and regulatory cooperation mechanisms. One important characteristic of CBDC and of course e-CNY is the programmability that could be realized by deploying smart contracts, enable conditional payments, guarantee payments, and other complex use cases to facilitate innovation. Think about letters of credit, bank guarantees, for example. Other applications involve e-commerce, trade finance, supply chain finance, capital market transactions, bonds, corporate bonds, derivatives, insurance payments, just to give you a few examples. I believe in the near future, we can see transactions being done using a multi-platform of currencies. As transactions are settled upon payment, it will improve payment efficiency and liquidity. These projects are already working with new technologies and platforms where payments between banks can take place in seconds, in a real time. A common multi-currency settlement platform, multi-CBDCs, would allow transactional parties to pay each other directly in different currencies without the need for intermediaries, the current rule of correspondent banks. So we will not need correspondent banks in the future. Regarding platforms, there are certainly several issues that still need to be addressed, such as governance, know your customers, and interoperability. The advance of digital yuan has already triggered the rush of central banks in several countries to study and create their digital currencies. To this end, President Biden has recently signed one executive order to study the digital dollar. A similar movement has been taking place with the European Central Bank regarding digital euro, and in more than 80 countries around the world. China's dominance in digital currency will naturally flow from its position as the world's largest exporter. And China is already years ahead in this technological race. The digital yuan was not just designed to buy a cup of coffee, in my opinion. It will go much further than that. Through the technologies that have been developed, such as the Chinese network, blockchain service network, it will be the preferred currency in trade with China. It will allow communications directly between machines to machine. Think about 5G and even in the next years, 6G. This is relevant and it is still unimaginable. Innovations that use of digital currency will emerge. China will have a market-leading advantage with CBDC, and exporters and importers will use the digital yuan for the sake of convenience in trade with that country, whether for agility, reduce transaction costs, and increase trade with China. The internationalization of Chinese currency will be digital through a different and efficient trade model. Unlike traditional models, with the recent sanctions applied to Russia in the conflict with Ukraine, no country will concentrate its transactions and its reserves in just few currencies. We are at the threshold of a new digital currency world. Thanks, Claudio. I will finish here.
Thank you so much, Sergio. And well, we have roughly 20-25 minutes for questions. And I'd like to start with Jamiel and regarding, Sergio has just mentioned the war in Ukraine. And I'd like to ask Jamiel, do you see a role in for central bank digital currencies in the transition to a financial system that is less dominated by the dollar? And what kind of advantage China might have from the fact that it is an early adopter of the central bank digital currency?
Do you mean that Ukraine is an early adopter or that China is the early adopter?
That China is an early adopter. What kind of advantage it gives China when we think of the global financial system architecture?
So a couple of things. One is, so the CBDC think tank, I hosted the Bank of Ukraine, the Ukrainian National Bank last week. The video is there on cbdctt.com. If you want to see the video, the bank came in and presented, and we hosted them and discussed some of these topics. We didn't discuss the de-dollarization topic, but we did discuss the Russian war of the Russian invasion. And one of the interesting things that came out is that the CBDC work that they were looking at originally, and I was in Kyiv actually in February 2020 when they did a soft kind of POC launch for their CBDC, and I was there, and actually it was the last time I was there before COVID hit. In some ways, their attention changed on for CBDCs, and their focus changed, meaning that they are now interested more around offline payments and the ability to transfer CBDCs between individuals in an offline manner. So I think that's an impact of the Russian invasion in the country, and I think they're responding in accordance to that. Then, in regards to the de-dollarization, I believe that the PBOC is not really interested in that. That's not their stated objective, and I don't believe that we will see that occur in any time soon. Even though that may not be their stated objective, it is something that could occur. Just the law of unintended consequences. But I don't see that occurring very, very soon. Although I would say Professor Wen might have a better perspective on what that plans might look like.
Thank you so much. And Daniel, what is the time frame for the adoption of a central bank digital currency in Brazil? Are we going to that direction, and what is the horizon for that?
Oh, thank you for the question, Claudia. Yeah, I'm a bit limited to talk about policy here, but well, as far as we learn about the central bank is promising some kind of pilot later this year, looking into legislation in Brazil. I think that there are still some needs to change a lot to allow the central bank to issue some kind of digital token or digital currency. So maybe you can pick these two time frames and try to build some kind of if something is going to be launched on a different way, that would take at least for a year or more. But yeah, you can always discuss on what CBDC is, and it's basically what was on my speech and the discussion I wanted to bring about. And well, definitely if you pick some characteristics of CBDC, you could even argue that Brazil has already a CBDC. So if you take many of the models that you see around the world, you see most of the features that are usually taken as CBDC. They are already in Brazilian regulation. So the answer here depends, and that's the usual way to an economist to go around all questions that are made.
Thank you, Daniel. David, what are the incentives that Chinese people have to use the digital currency over the mobile payment systems that are very good and they already have? What is the difference? What make somebody choose to use the digital currency?
Yeah, this is a very good question, because sometimes a lot of people wondering. I got asked a lot. So my standard answer is, of course, at this stage, there's a lot of red envelopes being used to educate people. Okay, let's not say it's bribing people, it's educate, because people need to know. And all of this consumer offline shopping kind of use cases always involve some red envelope. I don't know if you know what red envelope is, just free money, okay? Give to you so that you can use it, try it out, open an account, and so on. So that has probably a first stage. And so beyond that, I see some kind of issues, because as Daniel and we used to debate on this as well. I mean, China almost already had the CBDC without just sticking this label on. So because if all the money that is in WeChat Pay are 100% reserved in central bank accounts without interest, and all the payment network is going through a messaging network that is called the SU. It's dedicated for third-party payments network. So in many sense, it's already kind of digital currency without having a separate, infrastructure. So in that case, that's why, whether this money was in WeChat, in other places, people just treat them as which one's convenient. So for the consumer case, it's probably not going to grow exponentially, and I think it's not expected. The major advantage of CBDC in China, at least, maybe this is a surprise to many people, but it's because of some of the early success story of companies like WeChat Pay and Alipay. So the consumer data become monopolized in a way, because only, third-party payment, like, half of the use cases belong to this third party, half of the consumer data goes to the other one. So there is no uniform kind of credit history based on people's usage and everything. So this become a problem for monopoly and competition, because other vendors, what we call internet e-commerce vendors, will kind of have a problem of unfair competition from people who has built all this infrastructure before. So using central bank digital currency in a way levels the playing ground. You realize recently, I think maybe a couple of months ago, Ant Finance was going to public, and it was stopped. Some of the reason being, the consumer information was used to the credit history, which is a little bit unfair even for the banks. Banks don't have those credit history to make consumer loans. So that's why it's split into a company that does the payments, a company that does the loans. And the company that does the loans will have to share the credit history among other people. So that's one of the, I think, obvious reasons for the country to adopt this. It has little impact, at least on the convenience side for the normal user, okay? The second part of using CBDC will be business to business, business to government, government to business, like medical, insurance, state companies. It will be more transparent. It will be easier to manage the kind of large project where the money, if it goes through the bank, and it could be diverted. Right now, it's really point to point between the government to business and so on. And also there may be other implications where if there is case like COVID or disaster, there needs to have quick money flow into consumer directly. And the US, you use the tax refund. But if there is some kind of direct cash, digital e-CNY, there will be benefits. So these are like some examples of why e-CNY is very important in China, which is not just for the consumer. For the consumer, very little impact so far, at least.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Sergio, would you like to raise any question? You are on mute.
Oh, yes. Well, thank you, Claudia. Would you like to talk about privacy? Because some authors and the general public have raised some questions regarding privacy. special about CBDC when they say that if I use CBDC, the government will free my banks, no, my money, no, my transactions. And in my opinion, in personal opinion, I think nowadays we have already been traced by the government. Especially here in Brazil, we have a instant platform, payment platform called PIX, P-I-X, no? And also credit cards. In China, you have Alipay and WeChat Pay. So as you mentioned just before, so they have all the data information about you. So what's your opinion, Mr. David, about privacy in CBDC?
That's a very interesting question. I think the design of e-CNY has left a kind of anonymity. It's conditioned anonymity on some small amount transactions, especially using the offline payment methods, which I think it's equivalent to using cash in a certain ways. Of course, cash, you don't have the limit, but then withdraw from the bank and deposit in the bank, you also have this. Unless you have a lot of cash go around, then you are, for normal people's privacy, they are more or less equivalent, whether you use cash or use the other one. Of course, the anonymity is limited mostly to the offline, which is like cash. So it doesn't change that much. The other one you mentioned is that the electronic kind of your information, privacy information, has been collected way more beyond just when you're doing the payments, right? So you are, when you log on. I mean, for example, today, like COVID, if any country is using COVID, you absolutely have no privacy at all, because if they need to find you if you are in a train with somebody, okay? So I think this may become a mute question as the society become pretty digital. If you really want to be anonymous, use cash, right? That's still working. Fly or drive and then use cash. That's what I think. I mean, even Bitcoin, all these other ones does not have the anonymity like most people think they do, because you still have to advertise your address via some computer that has an IP address logged by your ISP and so on. So, and by the way, Uncle Sam is tracking even Merkel. So there's really no way to pay large amount without being known. Okay, so.
Can I add to that?
Yes,
answer?
yes,
So,
go ahead, Jeff.
So a couple of points. One, I didn't get my tax refund that you were talking about, by the way. That didn't come to me. I'm still waiting for that from Uncle Sam. But so a couple of things about privacy. One is that a lot of people that talk about privacy, when I sit down with them and I ask them about, what do you mean by being anonymous? What does that really mean? Does it mean that you will no one ever knows any of what you do, right? So when you walk to the store in the corner and you buy milk, does not the store owner know your identity that you bought milk, right? Even if you're using cash. So I think we need to clarify what we mean by anonymous. And there's very varying degrees of how somebody is anonymous and how their anonymous changes over time in the collection of other data about that transaction or set of transactions, which we might call metadata and things like that, right? So that it's not a black and white thing. It kind of can kind of fluctuate. That's one. And point two is that from a design point of view, I'm not saying that anybody's actually doing this. Purely from a design point of view, it is entirely possible that cryptography could be used in such a way that you are more anonymous with digital currency than you are with cash. That is possible. I'm not saying it's happening, but it's entirely possible. You can take, because cash, when you use cash, it's marked. There's a serial number. You can leave biological residue on the cash, right? There's sweat and there's DNA, right? And so when you use cash, you may be subject to those tracers that you leave on that note. Whereas with digital currency, there is possibility that cryptography is built in such a way that it's very, very difficult to trace, right? And so I think it really comes down to defining what anonymous means, and then also looking at the design, right? So the e-CNY has one specific design. I don't think you're very anonymous with that because you do have to provide your mobile phone number. And then in order for you to get a mobile phone number, there's other procedures, right? But it's entirely possible within the world of cryptography to design a digital currency that has a greater ability for you to be anonymous than, let's say, Bitcoin, which is pseudonymous, but through metadata analysis and companies like Chainalysis, they specialize in this. They set up fake Bitcoin nodes in different regions of the world to collect peer information and things like that to identify different users. And the minute you go off ramp from from Bitcoin to fiat, you get identified. So I think it's a complex problem. It's not black and white. And it really is something that we should look at the design of how that kind of is protecting, because the math of cryptography can provide the assurances, and we don't necessarily need to trust the government to say that this is anonymous or not.
Mm-hmm. And considering this possibility of becoming anonymous using digital currency, how do you face the issue of money laundering? It's easier or it's harder to combat money laundering with the digital currency? And this is for all of you. Daniel, would you like to start?
Yeah, I can do it, Claudia. I would add to the last question just to have an unanimous answer to the question. Of course, the privacy problem is still is already here. All transactions, all digital transactions are already recorded. So the problem is already here. Tackling into AML. Well, I'm not sure if I'm the right person to say if technologically it's more difficult or not, but definitely what brings difficulty to find out and into a fight against money laundering. It's not exactly technology, but how people find out ways to circumvent practices and even laws. So I think the money laundering problem is I think going the same direction from my previous answer. The problem that the privacy problem is already in place. Money laundering is a problem that is already in place. Of course, if you don't have any previous preparation to deal with technology and to everything that is coming into place, you're going to have many issues. So if you look into worldwide legislation, you're going to see that AML is probably the most important concern that countries have. So you can see many countries deciding on the use of virtual currencies in looking to from the economic aspect, having different conclusions, but all countries are definitely looking at changing their legislation to find out ways to prevent money laundering. So definitely it's something that is in place. It's something that countries shall prepare for dealing with technology. But in the end, if it gets more difficult to go against it, or it's more difficult to find out people having banknotes in wallets or in backpacks or any other ways they are able to do it. I don't know. It depends on if you can get traceability or not. And I think Jamil has already tackled on this point before, and how you can turn it into something that you can have a more private space. So definitely all the challenge are all in place.
Okay, thank you, Jamil. And David, would like to add something?
Yeah, I would
Okay,
just
I
add,
would just add quickly.
something that had an interesting wrinkle. Oh, go ahead, David, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think, the banks usually once every couple of years, a huge bank gets fined for money laundering. So they have a different way to get around it. On Bitcoin, of course, there is, the DeFi chain analysis just published a report. There's a lot of those things going on, but at least it's in the public blockchain. So, the reason they're doing this is because maybe the countries cannot enforce this type of law, right? So that's why they dare to do this, or they did not understand that all of those information public on the blockchain makes them very vulnerable in comparison to people that uses normal bank. So I would say as it develops the digital currency, the blockchain, the kind of based money system, including e-CNY and other CBDC, you'll make money laundering a little bit harder than the kind of correspondence bank. Everything is black box. We don't know, the pie goes to that correspondence bank, go to the other correspondence, then you lose trace of what's happening. Here, at least, you have more peer-to-peer, more public, more recordings. Even if you try to go around many, many rounds, the data is there on the public, so it's easy to track it. So in general, I would say the money laundering problem, even though currently cryptocurrency looks very bad, but in long run will be better, I think.
Thank you, Jamil.
I have an opposite view. So I think in the long run, it's going to get more complex. So you will see that, for example, the world of DeFi is going to grow or continue to grow despite our current bear market. Over the long run, the 10, 20 years, we'll see DeFi to continue to grow. And one of the areas of interest right now is to place CBDCs, one, inside of, let's say, an automated market maker where they can swap between one CBDC and another CBDC. And this is also research, is very, very preliminary research, and we're working on this type of research. If I stake a CBDC, theoretically, can I then swap it for another CBDC? And then what do I move across jurisdictions by doing that kind of swap? And two can I take CBDCs, park it, and pool it, and then issue a stable coin against the CBDC, kind of what people do with dollars, right? Right now, I think it's pool $100 million and issue 100 million stable coins. So I think that can create some complexities, and it's a way to circumvent. I'm not saying that it's a recommended way. It's a way to circumvent AML. If I use right now MakerDAO's DAI, I can transact, and there is really no way for any AML to occur if I'm using a stable coin like DAI. And so I think that DeFi world and the CBDC world are going to intersect. They're starting to converge. There's conversations happening right now. You'll see the Bank of Kazakhstan actually release pretty soon. I've already seen an early version of it, a paper on what they're looking at in terms of CBDC, in terms of DeFi. And I think things will get more and more complex. And I just wanted to contradict David a little bit just for fun.
Okay, thank you. And we are out of time, but I'd like to make one last question to David. And it's like going back to the question I made to Jamil in the beginning of the debate. Do you see the e-CNY as a channel to promote the internationalization of the yuan, the renminbi?
Okay, that's a very good question. I think I'm not affiliated with central bank per se. So the position of the PBOC, I think on this matter, at least at this point of time, is that e-CNY is purely for the domestic use, and it's that's why it's a DCEP. it's not intended. I mean, every country has its own legal currency that's legal use for that country. Cross-border is a different situation. Whether in the long run, the internationalization of the Chinese yuan is because of the e-CNY, or is because of the trade, or because of the situations like sanctions. The world breaks into regions, and so those political, economic factors, I think, is much more useful in terms of internationalization of the RMB than the technology of e-CNY. And by the way, before you close, I forgot one thing, and I just wanted to make an announcement that officially to have GMA to be on board to ZIBS as a professor, and we, on behalf of ZIBS, I wanted to offer congratulations and thank you very much to join our team. We are very happy to have you on board and come in person next time, come around Vietnam or wherever. Okay, that's my answer. Thank you, hopefully.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you. It's an honor.
Thank you, David. Well, unfortunately, we don't have more time. We have a lot of interesting questions still, but we'll need to leave them for a next opportunity. I'd like to thank you, Daniel, Jamiel, Sergio, and David for being with us today. And also thanks the Zhejiang University International Business School for the partnership with CEBC. And thank you all for participating in today's webinar and sending us a lot of interesting questions. I hope to see you all in the next event of CEBC. Thank you, and have a good day and good evening to the ones that are in Asia.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Bye-bye.